It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I'm going to be your host for the day. Appreciate you joining with us. Thanks very much. Glad to have you on board. So, we're going to cover a couple of different topics this morning, including the rather unusual but pertinent topic of how our Congressional Betrayers are the new hit of the Sochi 2014 Olympics. We're also going to touch on the FCC and their need to place monitors in the newsrooms of America. Wow. Did you just hear what I said? Let's understand this. The FCC believes that they need and desire and have the obligation and the right, frankly, to put news monitors in America's newsrooms. They want to do that because they believe that it's required so that they have the opportunity to determine exactly what the media's decision-making process is as they provide you news and information during the course of the day. Hello? Does the word Pravda come to mind? Yeah. You know, it's interesting. A few months ago, I broke a story that made it onto national news coverage through WorldNet Daily about how the United States of America stripped away the prohibition against utilizing propaganda against the American people. And isn't it funny that only a couple of short, scant months later, here we are looking at putting news monitors into the newsrooms of the United States of America? Kind of interesting, huh? These guys just don't stop. There's no limit to the treason and the betrayal and the desire to create a world where they are in absolute dictatorial control of everything you see, hear, read, discuss. I'm just disgusted. Okay. Our third topic. Interestingly enough, I broke the story the other day about the DHS and how they were putting a brand new license plate database to be able to monitor all of America through your license plates. They want to be able to track your travel, so they get your body as well as your mind, as well as where you are physically at, plus all of your electronic communications. Well, they've canceled that. However, they've announced they're going to buy another 704 million rounds of ammunition. I mean, guys, I guess the budget couldn't handle both. Perhaps that was just it. Their argument and their excuse for canceling it was that it was, quote, submitted without the approval of leadership to the bid website where government bids are put out. It's interesting. If you believe that, then I got to tell you, I must actually be the Pope. Not really. All right. Our fourth topic, and this one should come as no surprise, but it certainly is worthy of a discussion, and that is that Kathleen Sebelius and the HHS, excuse me, have determined that they need full access to the entire Twitter feed, including all of its historical data. Wow. Now, this makes total sense to me. So let's give spy capability to the most inept, corrupt, and failure-laden woman and administration within the entire United States government. I mean, what could go wrong, right? I mean, can't you see it all now? Every little agency gets its own little spy headquarters. Ostensibly, Kathleen Sebelius, who's perhaps the second most hated woman in America behind Hillary Clinton for all of the actions and the treasonous actions taken against the nation's best interest, now wants to monitor Twitter for, quote, public health reasons. Seems pretty thin to me. I got to tell you, the path and the word fast and furious is what comes to mind. Or the term fast and furious is what comes to mind. Because what we're talking about here is, for all intents and purposes, nothing more than a blatant attempt by government to expand and expose that which we already know is dangerous for us. Allowing the things that are happening in government to continue to go on reminds me kind of the idea of someone who's playing Russian roulette. So the picture is this. You got a guy sitting at a table, and he's full of false bravado, and he goes and pops open the cylinder of that revolver, and he slides in a shell casing. And he slams that home, and he pulls the hammer back halfway and just spins that wheel. Bzzz. Then without looking, he cocks it and says, "Watch this." You see, America is playing Russian roulette. We have this false bravado out there that it can't happen here. And we're fooling ourselves. At some point, reality is going to catch up with us. And when it does, there's going to be hell to pay. So let's talk about our first topic this morning, because as I was reading this morning and I was doing my research and some homework on some of these different stories out there, I came across the story of Dirty Harry Reid. Now, Dirty Harry, this guy just kills me. He's actually out there putting out a tweet, and he thinks he's slick with his Twitter feed, right? Of course, the HHS wants to monitor him, too. So he's out there with his Twitter feed, and he posts out a tweet that says basically that the Koch brothers are funding constitutional efforts, right? Well, he neglects to mention that the previous day he was at a fundraiser for his own personal aggrandizement and continuation within the Senate at a billionaire's house. Dirty Harry Reid, the king of lies, the king of treason and traitorous actions against his own nation. No other member of the Olympic national team, which I have now labeled called the Congressional Betrayers, has won so many gold medals for treason. But here, even Dirty Harry can top himself. He publicly faults the Koch brothers for supporting pro-Constitution causes, while simultaneously holding a fundraiser at a billionaire's house. He might even have actually had the unmitigated gall to tweet that from that guy's living room. I got to tell you, every time I see Dirty Harry, I want to vomit. Because this is a guy who is the face, the poster boy for corruption and treason. There is no one else in Congress, even exceeding John Boehner, who really epitomizes the team captain for the Congressional Betrayers. Here's a guy who sycophantically jumps on board every program that Obama has, unless it threatens his only other love, the advancement of the Democratic Party. The other day, I talked about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the treaty that has been negotiated for the past 5 years in secret, the one that the media is not talking to you about. the one that you don't see any discussion about whatsoever, the one that was hidden from congressmen under its negotiation, the one that all of these bankers and brokers and multinational trade representatives are negotiating on the government's behalf, and yet the government itself is prohibited from seeing the contents of this treaty. This is the same Senate members that are going to have to vote on it, right? And the president presented this treaty to the Senate, and Harry Reid quietly put it in his pocket and said, well, we can't really vote on that because, well, we have this election coming up in only about, 8 months, 9 months, and to be honest with you, voting on this treaty right now might be a problem. I'm waiting for the Dirty Harry trick. He's going to slip this in one night at around, 11:45 p.m. No one will have read it. He'll just barely have a quorum, made up all secretly of his favorite little boys and girls. And we may well find ourselves on the wrong end of a sovereignty-stealing treaty. You see, Dirty Harry, this is a guy who has been accused, and I'll say accused, of allegedly, and I do use the word allegedly, cutting real estate deals using his children as fronts and props. He's worth untold millions. And as long as he's been in the Senate, there's no way that a guy like him could have adjudicated that kind of wealth and developed and built and created that level of wealth at $195,000 a year. I mean, he's still got his expenses, right? He's still got to keep up a massive home in Nevada, and he's still got to keep up his beautiful Georgetown mansion. Even though he only works along with the rest of the Congressional Betrayers, they only practice 25% of the time. So you got to wonder, what is it with Harry Reid? I mean, what does this... He's almost at the end of his life because he's an old codger. He touts himself as this, ex-boxer who's this tough guy. He speaks very softly. But he wields incredible power. And this guy is the king of dirty tricks. I mean, this is the guy that pulled off the nuclear option in the Senate. He's the guy that got Obamacare pushed through with only Democratic votes. For the record, if you don't know, just so you get a handle on Dirty Harry's tricks, here's what he did. Obamacare, because all bills that generate and require spending have to begin in the House, it started as a bill that was originally intended to be a way to help military families pay their mortgages while their fathers and mothers were overseas fighting on behalf of a country that doesn't even practice the democracy we're selling. And then the bill came over, and it was, of course, passed overwhelmingly in the House. Then it came over to the Senate, and Harry Reid took the bill and he opened the capsule, and he poured out all the contents that was intended to support and protect military families and their ability to be able to have their mortgages paid. And he reinserted, he injected Obamacare into that bill. And then, because he knew that if he sent it back to the House as a marked up bill, the House would say, well, what happened to our mortgage payment program? He utilized a dirty little parliamentary Dirty Harry trick. And he got it approved by the Senate alone, because the House had already approved it. And that's how we got stuck with Obamacare. 1/6 of our economy, your rights, your liberties, and your freedoms, all of that was stolen away by the team captain of the Congressional Betrayers Fund. When I look at Dirty Harry, he reminds me of offal, O-F-F-A-L. You know what that is? That's what you discard when you gut the pig. Harsh? Hope so. There is no human being, perhaps at least in the male side of the fence. With the female side of the fence, it's a pretty close toss-up between taking a look at Hillary and wanting to go, and perhaps Kathleen Sebelius. But Harry, on the male side of the fence, there's just something about this guy that makes me grit my teeth. I really don't like him, in case you haven't figured that out. He is the dirtiest, slimiest, most traitorous, treasonous human being that we have currently in government, at least in the Congressional Betrayers team. We do have another team. That's the Executive Betrayers team. And they're in fairly close competition, but generally in the political Olympics, you see the Executive Betrayers team, they work and play in different sports. Then there's the Judicial Betrayers team. That's a different sport altogether, too. But you see, all of them combined are our submission to Sochi 2014. These people really really turn my stomach. Well, let me put it to you this way. I said the other day that administrative agency employees were, for all intents and purposes, maggots. You know, teeming, crawling, creepy, slimy, slithering. Well, that's kind of an insult to maggots, and I apologize to all maggots in advance. When I think of gutted offal, I have to apologize to that because I've applied the same comparison with Harry. What I don't understand is how these people allow themselves to be tricked. The people in Nevada, and quite frankly, the people in Congress. Harry has done more to destroy the value of the Republican brand than almost anyone I know. And yet he's their self-elected leader. I don't get it. And I'm not sure you do either. What I do know is that if you look up Dirty Harry's little secrets, and perhaps that's his problem, perhaps someone in some government agency, which shall remain nameless, has an enormous file on Harry's dirty little real estate deals. And every once in a while, he gets a hand-delivered manila envelope, you know, and he pops it open and he takes a look and he pulls it out and he just peeks at it like a gambler looks at the corner of his card and, oh, they got that. And at the bottom is a little hand-printed note that says, "This is what you're going to do, Harry, or else we'll send this to the New York Times." Oh, sorry, not the New York Times. Let's make that the Wall Street Journal, because the New York Times won't, they're not going to publish and print that. Ministry of Propaganda isn't going to do anything that might actually alert their public, who they truly owe their allegiance to, the truth. It's funny that the fourth estate, the fourth arm of government, which is the one that's supposed to act as, for all intents and purposes, our predominant watchdog over this government, has decided in their infinite wisdom that they're much better off just playing along. And so Dirty Harry is never exposed for the treasonous dirt that he really is. I'd like to see an expose on Harry. I'd like to see somebody really, some investigative journalist with creativity and a little hard work, elbow grease, and a muscle dig into Harry's background. That would be kind of interesting. Well, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the FCC and how they need to have monitors inside of our newsrooms just to keep everybody honest. You know what I mean? Wow. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Michael Evans. I'm feeling rather cynical this morning, in case you hadn't noticed. We'll be back in just a minute. When